It's probably because maybe it knows we're in a two-party state, or maybe it's just covering space for Google to get it. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we're gonna get going.
Did you get confirmation from the people?
Yeah, I'm gonna say now. FYI, we are recording this meeting. If anyone doesn't consent, please let us know. Google just sent us a friendly reminder. To those that are your remote, I got confirmation from Emily. Thank you that you guys can hear us. I think we're gonna hold questions to the end. But if you have questions, just feel free to Slack me. It's probably the easiest way, so I can monitor it outside of my computer. That's in presentation mode right now. But I want to introduce you guys all to Miriam. She's a good friend of mine. We used to work at Relativity together. Little fun fact, when Miriam left Relativity, I cried. And I feel like that says something about me, because I'm not a crier. I think most people would probably think that. So Miriam's been a really great resource to me in my professional career, also personally, with navigating all things that are complex, as being a woman who works in technology, being a person who invests wisely in terms of your time and your energy and your money at the end of the day. So I'm really excited for her to be here. I think this is a really awesome opportunity for all of us. But I also want to thank you guys for being here as well to provide Miriam with feedback as she embarks on this new journey and does this hopefully for a living.
Yes, thank you. That was a great intro. Glad that was recorded.
That's right.
Let's get back to you.
Hi, everyone.
Here's the pitch that Jackie gave. Okay, great. I'm so glad to see a big group of ladies. Well, I'm glad to see you. My name's Miriam. And so I've created a seminar series that's generally titled Taking Care of Number One. You're number one, you're number one, you're number one, I'm number one. And this first one is all about retirement savings. So I am going to hold the questions till the end to see if we have any time at the end. I would say Jackie's going to be in charge of keeping track of if I start speaking bananas fast. She'll let me know. I do speak fast, but it's in the bananas level. She'll stop me. I would say give a wave if I'm talking about something that makes no sense. I really want this to be productive and useful for you. So if I'm flying through something, just give a wave and I'll stop and we'll start that slide over again. Cool. So taking care of number one. So I'll start with the reality, right? The reality is we're going to be responsible for funding the majority of our retirement. And I believe that our health, well-being, and happiness may be tied in part to how well we plan. So why aren't we more actively giving our retirement planning more attention? So I think that the problem has lots of facets to it. One is, for many of us, retirement is a far-off concept, and life today is hard. Paying your bills is hard. Getting through today is hard. There's little to no formal education. Unless your parents were really into this topic, or you're super curious on your own, companies are well-meaning, but there's not good training on this type of thing. I really found when I was researching this that the info out there is super high level. Save as much as you can. A 401k is, or I'm reading IRS regulations. I'm an attorney, I don't mind doing that, but it doesn't make sense in giving people sort of concise information. I think a lot of folks feel that preparing smartly is super complex and should be sort of outsourced to an expert. I don't agree with that. And then money talk is frowned upon and considered taboo. That's one of my other seminar presentations, is trying to get especially women comfortable talking about money. Men do it, so we should do it too. And the last one is the sort of set it and forget it mentality. It encourages complacency, right? You get a job, you set a percentage or not, and then you sort of never think about it again. So I really think that we're all smart and logical, but it makes sense to me why folks have checked out faced with this landscape. So in this presentation, I really want to just sort of educate a little bit on the topic, demystify some of these concepts, reframe stuff. You already know a lot of these concepts you're already going to be familiar with, sort of just reframe it or talk about it in more depth. And then really, most importantly, show how small changes can make a gigantic impact later. Right, I want to plant the seed so that you feel encouraged to take a more active role in your own retirement planning. So a couple things I'm not going to be doing. I'm not obviously going to give you specific investment advice. I'm not qualified to do that. This is not an exhaustive presentation. As long as I'd like to keep you here for 3 hours, I'm not going to. And then there is no one true answer. Don't ever give anyone money who says that there is. So this is these are my thoughts and the research that I've done on this topic. So before you sort of check out, if any of you are inclined to check out, I want to just acknowledge a couple of real objections to thinking about retirement planning, giving attention to it, putting money towards it, right? These are three big ones. You're barely making ends meet as it is. It's forever away. You have other priorities, saving for a home, saving for emergency funds, living, and then student loans, right? I had over $200,000 in student loans, one of my other seminars that I eventually paid off. It took all my consumable income for a long time. So I get it. It's still my hope that you listen to this presentation, you keep an open mind, and even if you can't implement any of these things now, they're percolating in the back of your mind for when you're ready. The only objection that I'm willing to accept today is that your parents have set up a non-revocable, fully funded trust fund. In that case, you don't need this. Not me. Okay, so why start saving now? Now means now, whether you're 25 or you're 45. What's now mean? The first part of this is you're going to need more money than you think. So you're probably going to live a long time, right? We are living a long time now. I wouldn't necessarily say we're living the last few years of our life are particularly great, but you can keep people alive a long time now, and none of us want to be a burden on our family. Social Security is only going to be a small help. So the average about Social Security payment right now is something around $1,700 a month. So let's bump that up to $2,000 a month. Could any of us live literally on $2,000 a month? None of us could. So it's only going to be a small help to us by the time we retire. Many people are pushed into early retirement. I was surprised when I learned this. I read an article that said that 50% of people over 50 said that they were either pushed into early retirement, pushed out of their high-paying job into a lower-paying job, or to underemployment. So it's something for us to think about. I think lots of times we think, I'll just work till I don't have to anymore. We may not get that option. So the last few years of life can be very expensive. Relying on inheritance is risky, right? So my mom, before she died, she was really sick for 3 years, and in the last 18 months of that, we paid $7,000 a month to keep her alive at home, and just completely depleted the family resources. So it's risky to rely on it. Pensions, right, for the most of us are a thing of the past. We're not going to get it. Healthcare costs are out of control and skyrocketing, and inflation is a thing. So let's talk about inflation for a second. So we all know that $1 in 1950 bought you more than $1 today buys you, and $1 today is going to buy you less in the future. But what does that really mean? So this chart looks at what $100 is going to be worth over the years based on different inflation percentages. So let's look at the blue line. 3% is sort of like the common use percentage that folks are using. And the takeaway from this is if we look at, starts off at $100, in less than 25 years, that $100 is going to be worth less than half inflation. Let's look at it in a different way. So let's look at inflation over 40 years. I use 40 years because a lot of young folks starting out their career are going to be retiring in 40 years. So $1 today, in 40 years, to buy the same thing, think of the dollar store, you'll need $3.26 to buy the same thing that you would buy today for $1. Let's look at it and when you think about retirement. People are always saying, oh, I want $1 million when I retire. So I always say to them, okay, do you mean you want an actual $1 million, like in your bank account, $1 million? Because if that's the case, in 40 years, that's only worth about $300,000 today. Could any of us retire on $300,000 if we're going to live 25 more years? Probably not. I think what folks are really saying is they want what $1 million would actually buy today because they're thinking of what they could do with $1 million. So in that case, you'd need over $3 million. That's depressing, I know.
Yeah.
It's depressing for me. Yeah, it's like a shocking thing to see how the value of money decreases over time. But we do have saving grace. This is a positive presentation. Part 2, why to save now, is the amazing power of compounding. So let's talk about compounding. First, let's take a deep dive into the formula of compound interest. Just kidding, I don't understand this formula. I would never do that. But I do want to just show us a couple examples of compounding. So we all know that, like, let's take the bottom line. This is a person who put in $10,000 once, let it sit for 20 years, it's making 10%. Okay, the orange line is showing if you did not let the interest you earned every year reinvest back. You just pulled it out. That's simple. So at the end of 20 years, this guy's got $30,000. If you let it sit, 20 years. If you let it sit for 20 years and let that 10% reinvest, you made an extra $37,000 in change. It's the power of compounding. Let's look at another example. Let's take this top guy up here. So in this top example, this person starts at age 25 and puts in $1,000 a year for 10 years and then stops. So at age 34, they don't invest anything else. They just sit there, they sit back. In both of these examples, they're like 8% interest. So this guy puts in $10,000, stops at age 34. At age 65, he's got $157,000 in change. Now, let's look at this person below. This guy says, I can't afford to put away $1,000 a year, I'm 25. I'm gonna wait. So this person waits 10 years and starts at age 35, and then puts in $1,000 a year for 30 years, triple the other guy's investment. But because he started later and it sat for less time, he ended up with only $122,000. It's the power of putting the money in as soon as you can and letting it sit for as long as you can. So these guys say it best, right? Albert Einstein, compound interest is the 8th natural wonder of the world and the most powerful thing he's ever encountered. More recently, right, Warren Buffett, his wealth has come from a combination of living in America, lucky genes, and compound interest. That's why it's so important to start now, whatever now is to you. Cool. So there's different ways to save for retirement, right? I know you know all this, but just to sort of roundabouts. Hopefully by the time we retire, you're going to have some cash, you'll have some stock, maybe an annuity pension. We'll all have some Social Security, hopefully, and some property. So today I'm really going to focus, obviously, on saving within a proper retirement account and the benefits to doing that. Okay, so you're going to have a lot of decisions, right? We're going to look at whether comparing 401k to IRAs, how you funded for your post-tax money, how much and which funds. So we're going to take those piece by piece. Let's look at work or on your own. Now, I know that this presentation, all the details of this presentation won't apply to every person and every job, but I still think it's valuable even if your company's terms are different. You know, you'll have lots of jobs in your career, your company will iterate, you may have spouses. So here we are. So saving through the employer plan. Usually there's a waiting period, and I know that you know most of this, but just sort of roundabout. When you start a new job, when you're saving through a 401k plan, usually there's a waiting period of about a month. Your employer will contract with the fund provider. Sometimes you're automatically enrolled. You'll want to ask about that. And some folks actually, they find that those who get automatically enrolled, like let's say 3%, that over time, more people are enrolled in the plan, but they enroll at a lower percentage because they just don't ever rethink it or they don't raise it. You'll have fewer investment options in the open market. Pre-tax is the norm, although that's changing. Many are offering a Roth post-tax now. And then when you leave your company, you have options. Just remember, you know you'll have options. You can actually keep it with your employer plan legally. You can transfer it to your new employer or into your personal IRA account. You can cash it out. Don't ever do that. So do one of these options. Okay, so again, so some companies offer contribution. Oftentimes it's a 3 or 4% dollar-to-dollar match, or like a percent, 50% up to 3%, or 50% up to 6%. Then in terms of vesting, to explain that, it's usually over 3 or 4 years, sometimes immediate. And I just wanted to show a quick example of vesting since some folks have that confused. So in this example, I'm making $50,000 a year, saving 10%, getting 6%. Okay, my employer is matching me 3% and it vests over 4 years in equal portion, 25% a year. And let's just say on day 1 of year 4, I quit. I get all the money that I invested. So I get the $15,918 I put in as my money, but I'm only going to get 75% of the employer's money. That's how the vesting works in this example. So let's talk for a second about saving outside of work, right? So why would you save outside of work if your company has a plan? Well, okay, because you're self-employed, you have no choice, you don't offer a plan, but I'm going to really pitch to you guys that you do it even if you have a plan. Maybe you want to save addition to your 401k, you might not be happy with the plan, you want more flexibility, or you hit the max. It would be amazing. Administratively, right, it's really simple. Folks always seem scared about opening up their own brokerage account. You pick a brokerage house, it's really easy. You designate an IRA account, you'll have tons of options, and then if you do other investing, you can see both your retirement and non-retirement together. So now let's talk a little bit about taxes. So we just talked about, there's different ways of saving for retirement, and you might say, well, if I can save cash and I'll have stock and I'm gonna have a house and I'm gonna this and that and the other, why bother? Well, the big reason why you really wanna focus on putting money set aside for retirement in a retirement account is for the huge tax savings. So let's just do a quick distinction of the difference between the pre-tax and the post-tax. So for pre-tax, right, it's called the traditional savings, deferred savings, typically 401k. With this, you're funding your retirement account with money that has not been taxed. That happens later. So if your company gross pays you $1,000, you put $100 away for retirement, you're only taxed on that $900 right now. Conversely, post-tax, which if you hear the word Roth, that's what that means, post-tax, then you're funding your retirement account after taxes have already been taken out. So here, same deal, gross pays 1,000, you put 100 aside, you're still being taxed on that original 1,000, just at a baseline distinction. So I know tax conversation is very boring, that's why I have my alarm clock snoozing over there, but I do want to just quickly sort of describe to you this scene. So let's take on our bottom left here, the taxable individual account non-retirement. That's like what you might have right now. You're going to go buy some whatever BP or Target stock out of your account. You're funding that with money that you've already paid tax on. Whenever you sell that, assuming it's after a year, you're going to pay the capital gains rate of that. Now let's look at the top. The top one is you're funding your after tax, that's your Roth, right? So in that case, you've already been taxed, just like in the first example, but now it all grows tax-free. The interest grows tax-free, your dividends grow tax-free, your capital gains grows tax-free, and when you take it out, it's tax-free, completely tax-free. Opposite of that is doing your pre-fund, right? So here, you're not getting taxed at the onset, but when you remove it, when you retire, you're going to pay your ordinary income tax. So if you take it out when you're 70 and your income tax rate is 15%, that's what you'll pay at that time. Now, I'm going to break these out into some individual examples. I know it makes you feel like that, and I'm very sorry, but it is important. So I'll just do some quick examples just to show you how these three different work. So in the first example, we have just a regular, I'm going to give you the same example for all three, right? You're going to buy something for $1,000 now, and then over years, you're going to have some dividends that you reinvest, and then you're going to sell it in 40 years for a profit. Okay, so this is the one where you're pulling it just out of your checking account in a normal non-retirement account. So you pay taxes on that $1,000 originally, right, from your employer. Then you're going to pay long-term capital gains tax on those dividends, and then you're going to pay, again, long-term capital gains tax on the remaining profit when you sell. My point of this slide is to show you that you're taxed on money that was already taxed. Now let's look at the example on a Roth. On a Roth, you pay the taxes up front and then never again. And then on the tax deferred, you don't pay any taxes till the end. If that makes sense. Cool. So when you think about tax deferred, I have like this slide made a little extra so it's the only one that has flowers on it. So when you think about whether or not you're going to fund your retirement with pre or post-tax money, I want to make one distinction for funding it with money that's not taxed yet, which is the traditional 401k. Okay, so I wanted to show you the definition of marginal versus effective tax rate. So in this example, I'm making $50,000 a year, okay? My marginal tax rate is 22%. You go over here, this is our tax bracket for 2019, you find your salary, you look over, it's 22%. That's the highest tax rate. But the taxes I really pay on my salary is not 22%, because I'm paying 10% on the first $9,500, and then I'm paying 12% between $9,500 and $38,700, and I'm only paying 22% on that last $11,300. So when you take all that together, that's your actual effective tax rate, which comes out to be 14%. I'm giving this example to you or describing this to you because I want you to understand that when you think about your funding with pre-tax money, I want you to look at your marginal tax rate because it comes off the back end. So let's say I make $50,000 a year and I'm going to put $10,000 away in my 401k. Well, now the government thinks it's going to tax me on $40,000 income, not $50,000. So I've saved the 22%. That's the savings for me. It's the 22%. It's the highest tax rate. Cool. Okay, so we talked about the huge benefit, right, of tax benefits. There's, of course, going to be some rules and restrictions. I'll fly through these pretty quickly because you can find them easily online, but I just want to sort of just like touch them a little bit. The first one, so again, just so for nomenclature, traditional means pre-tax, Roth is post-tax. Okay, so for both types, you can invest with pre or post-tax money at work if your company offers it, and also in an IRA outside of work. You have those options in both cases. In all the cases, they have restrictions on when you can pull the money out. So you have to be 59 and a half before you can start drawing off the money. If you don't do that, you'll get penalized. So takeaway number one, don't take the money out before you're 59 and a half. The penalties vary based on the type of fund it is, but just know that there's some penalties. The Roth has an extra rule of having to hold it for 5 years. They're small, easy to follow rules. I want to expose you to the concept of required minimum distribution. So, and this is one of the big distinctions between the Roth and the pre-tax is that when you're doing a traditional pre-tax, starting at 70 and a half, they force you to start pulling the money down, right? Because they haven't got any taxes yet on that, and they want their tax money. For a Roth, you actually don't ever have to stop pulling it down. You can actually keep funding a Roth till you're really old. You can't do that with the other one. So that's something to keep in mind. I just threw this out in here, inheritance. It's a lot easier to pass off a Roth than a pre-tax. So if you do it right, your heirs, you can pass off all your Roths to your heirs tax-free. Now here's another big takeaway I want you to remember is always set your beneficiaries on your retirement accounts. I can tell you a horror story in my family of when that wasn't the case. So you just want to make sure that you set your beneficiaries so it passes outside of your typical estate. And that ensures for your Roth that they'll get it tax-free. And I just want to point out a small thing is that if your company offers a 401k plan, there are some restrictions with funding a pre-tax IRA outside of work. So just saving in a Roth IRA is much more common, and that's my suggestion to you. So you can get around it, but why hassle with it? It's just much more common to have a 401k, whether you do pre or post-tax at work, and then a Roth post-tax IRA. Cool. Just one more slide on some of the rules and restrictions. This is actually comparing post-tax at work and outside of work, if that's ever offered to you. And more and more companies are offering it. So one big restriction to the Roth IRA is that there is an income limit. It's even not that high, but there's a perfectly legal workaround called the backdoor Roth IRA that's easy to do. So I wanted you to know when people say, oh, I made too much money to do a Roth IRA, then you just know, oh yeah, it's not a presentation sheet. I don't remember what it's called, but this lady said that there was a workaround on it and then look it up. Okay, there's no restriction at work when you have that plan. In terms of timing, you can actually fund a Roth IRA up until tax day of the next year. So for example, March 1st of this year, I could have funded a 2018. So you have some little extra time. And at work, it's just normally annually. And then remember I told you never cash out your accounts. I do want you to know that for a Roth IRA, because you're putting money in that you've already paid taxes on, the money that you put in is your money, and you can remove that anytime you want penalty-free. The capital gains you can't remove. And actually, that's how I originally started. Susie Orman, she suggested that folks do that to build up their emergency fund, and that's actually how I funded my first one. And then I sort of knew like it had to be like a real emergency for me to pull it out, and that's how I started doing an annual one, because I knew that I could pull it out, and why not let it like accrue great interest for me, and then hopefully not pull it out. So a takeaway here for you is if you ever have a Roth 401k at work that you fund, convert it when you leave, and then you don't have to worry about that stuff. Cool. Okay, so to pre or post-tax, right? People are always wondering what's the best option for them. So I'll just give you some conventional wisdom, right? If you're young, you're making less money, you're in a lower tax bracket right now, folks say take the tax hit. They also say, listen, the tax laws change. We just all saw the tax laws change. And it's totally unpredictable. I have no idea what's going to happen in 10 years once it's 40. I'd rather just know it and just take it now. But there's some good arguments on the other side. The other side, obviously, if you're making good money now, you're in a higher tax bracket. Remember, it comes off the end. You're betting it's going to be lower in retirement, right? You won't have a job in retirement. Maybe you need the extra money now. There's less admin hassle. Like if your employer matches you, the employer match will go pre-tax. So then when you leave, you might have funds in both accounts. Not the biggest deal in the world, but it's in administration. And then of course you may not have a choice because your company may only offer, if they offer a plan at all, to be pre-tax. But really, I don't want you to get paralyzed. Don't let this decision paralyze you from making any decision. So I'm going to give you a suggestion. So my suggestion, and this is Miriam's suggestion, just like some regular person who's lived a life, is to do both. And I'm going to tell you why that's my suggestion. So my suggestion is that you fund a 401k at work, a traditional one, and then also fund an annual Roth outside of work. Really, my goal is that by the time you retire, you've got a lot of money in both accounts, substantially more in the Roth. And the reason why I like having some money in a traditional account is because later you can convert the 401k into a Roth and you're not making much money. So here's two quick stories, right? So I worked at Accenture for almost 5 years. I was building up a little 401k. I left and went to grad school. I made no money for 4 years, but I didn't want to pay taxes on that money. And I didn't want to wait 40 years and have a huge balance to pay taxes on. So what I did was I converted it slowly over the 4 years and never had to pay taxes on that money. So I'll never ever have to pay taxes on that. Last year, I basically took the year off. And again, I took the money from my last employer and I converted it this year. So even if I pay taxes on it this year, it'll be really little, way less than I would have paid the company and less in retirement. So I liked having that flexibility. And here's a couple more reasons of why you should have both. The first one is you want to have control and flexibility over your money. When you retire, the government considers money in a pre-tax account to be taxable income. They're going to tax you on it. Any money in a Roth, they can't tax you on it. It's not taxable income. So think about those tiers, your tax brackets. And secondly, Social Security. So you're all going to get your Social Security payment. The government has a formula that they do for it. Let's call it $2,000, like we said earlier. You'll get that amount no matter how much money you have saved in your retirement accounts. But the government looks at your taxable income for that year, and if it's too high, they will tax you on that $2,000 payment as well. So you want to keep that in mind, right? You don't want to get killed on taxes because all your money's in a 401k deferred. Additionally, a lot of folks don't know this, but your Medicare premium payments will be higher if you have a lot of taxable income. So not a huge deal, but I just want you to have it in the back of your mind. Also, it can pay to delay Social Security. So here we have up here, you can actually start collecting Social Security at age 62, but you'll only get 70% of whatever the government formula is for you for the rest of your life. If you wait to 67, that's for all of us in our ages, you'll get 100%. But if you wait till 70, just those 3 extra years, you're getting an extra 24% for the rest of your life of payments. Now, I'm not going to go into the game of when to file, the factors involved. We're all too young to really think about that right now anyways, but there are a lot of factors. But I just want to sort of point out to you sort of like there's break-even points, right? So in that first box on the left there, that's showing that if you're comparing pulling down Social Security between 62 and 67, and you live longer than 76 years old or projected to, you're going to want to wait. The one that's more interesting to me, because we're all projected, most of us are projected to live well into our 80s, is comparing it between 67 and 70. So that's just showing us, listen, if you're projected to live longer than 82, you're going to want to wait until after 70. And so here's just a little sort of another Miriam suggestion. When you retire and you're not too old, just an idea, you can draw from your pre-tax just a little bit to keep you in low tax brackets and start pulling down from your Roth that doesn't count as taxable income. Or you can even convert some of that money even then and pay a little taxes. And then when you're really old, start pulling on your Social Security and combine. So my goal here is just that I want you guys to be empowered and have flexibility in how you play it out. Okay, so let's look at how much. So the first thing I want to show you is that there are annual maxes for when you save through an employer plan. This is federally set, and when you save outside. So let's look at work first on the left side. So at work, the annual max was just raised in 2019 is $19,000. That's if you're under 50. If you're over 50, it's a little higher. And that combines both kinds of 401k plans you might have. It does not include your employer match, like that 3%. There is, if you're a super, super high earner, there are some restrictions. None of us need to worry about that. Then on outside of work, the max is $6,000. And that also combines both types outside of work. But I do want to point out to you that these operate independently. So you can actually save $25,000 a year legally. Okay, so one thing I want to talk to you about is the paycheck effect. When people say, how much should I save? I can't afford to save 10%. I want to say, listen, 10% of your 401k does not equal 10% less take-home pay. So I wanted to show like a very specific example of that. So in this example, again, I'm making $50,000. And let's look at that second column. So here's like your paycheck, what your paycheck looks like. And this is persons paid monthly, just was easier to do it that way. So in the second column here, they're not putting anything to their 401k, and it just breaks down your taxes, Medicare, Social Security, and then your net take-home pay. Okay, great. So now I have me putting 10% away pre-tax. So we see here in the second column, in the second row, 416, 10% goes to my 401k. What I want you to notice is that the taxes I'm paying are less because I'm not taxed on that money right now. So I actually save $91 and change in taxes. Okay, that's fascinating. So what I'm really trying to show you is that while you put 416 away for your retirement, you only paid $325 right now to do that. You've invested 10%, but you only paid 7.8% to do it. So when you think about how much money you can afford to put away, think about your paycheck effect, what that really means to you at the end of the day. Okay, so let's look at a couple examples of like sort of what does this money really mean? Like, what am I saying here? So here on this chart, I'm showing you, again, 50,000, 10%. We're making, and these shows us the different rates of return, 5 to 8%. I highlighted 6% because that's sort of like the conventional. I know everyone's getting a million% right now in the stock market, but when you think about the long haul, 6% is typically sort of the acceptable, agreed upon conservative rate of return overall. So I'm showing you here that if you just put 10% away, if this person, it ends up being of $200,000 at that salary. Obviously, I'm not considering them getting salary raises or anything like that. I want to show you how the money can really add up. Your balance is $773,000 and change at 6%, and then when I threw it in with your employer contribution, you add over $1 million. This does not factor in inflation. I just wanted to show you the raw numbers of how, over time, these numbers can really tick up. And then, of course, it really does amazing things at the higher percentages. This is comparing different rates. Before we were saving 10%. Now I'm looking at saving 3, 10, or 15%. And in this example, I'm giving it all 6% rate of return, and these are all pre-tax. So, and the reason why I'm showing this is because when people say to me, I cannot afford to save for retirement right now, I literally cannot afford it, I say to them, okay, start small and you build it up, right? Can you afford 3%? Well, that's sort of a nebulous concept. Really, for this person, this is their difference in their actual take-home pay at saving 3% is only $45 every 2 weeks. Can you save $45 every 2 weeks? I bet you most people can when they're at almost $500,000 with an employer contribution by the time they retire. So I'm showing this to really show that like the tiniest bits of savings can add up over time. And really it actually encourages you to increase your savings over time. And of course your salary is going to change over time. And so then I'm really showing you at the high levels, if you can put just $250 away every paycheck, if you're getting paid twice a month, look at you're at over $1 million just off the bat right there, not including your other assets you're going to accrue. So here's my suggestion: is if it's offered, set your annual auto increase. Some plans have a place where you can set an annual auto increase. Set it, and then increase it with each raise. Simple, you won't even notice it then. Okay, so you're 40. Is it too late? No. Take a minute. Feel bad for yourself. It's even more important to invest. And here I just wanted to show a couple examples. Let's look at scenario 1 and 2. So in scenario 1 and 2, I got the person to about $350,000. In the first example, they're saving just the max in a Roth IRA outside of work. We're doing it for 25 years, and they're going to end up investing $150 and getting about $350. Scenario 2, they wait 10 years because they don't want to deal with it. They can't deal with it. In order to hit that same close to $350, they have to invest $60,000 more in order to hit that same amount. Compounding, same thing. And then I just threw in the third example to show, like, listen, it's never too late to start saving. If you hit the max, you really have a nice nest egg. Okay, so I haven't told you how much you need. I did that for a reason. I do not know how much you need to retire. There's a lot of factors involved, but I do want to just explain to you a couple of the common concepts that are thrown out there, so when you see them again, you're sort of like familiar with them. The first one is saving X factor. Okay, so this one is, you'll see on the internet, it'll say, hey, by the age of 30, you should have saved 1 times your salary. So if I make $50,000 by the age of 30, I should have $50,000 saved. By the age of 35, $100,000 saved. I don't like this one. I think it's discouraging that most of us don't meet that, but it's out there. The next one is the income replacement. This one says, hey, you should have enough money by the time you retire to pull down, to be able to live off of 70% of your income. So the theory here is that you're going to need less money when you retire because your debts are paid off, maybe your house is paid off, you need less. There's problematic here because of health costs and because you might want to travel and do stuff. But this one's saying that you should have enough money to replace your income at 70%. Another comment is the multiply by 25 rule. This says, okay, figure out how much money you're going to need per year when you retire, times it by 25, that's how much you need. So if I say I need $40,000 a year to live off of, times 25 is $1 million, I need $1 million in my account. This is probably the most common one, is the 4% rule. The 4% rule says you should have enough money in your retirement account that you only pull down 4% every year. You should be able to live off of that. So these are just some common formulas that are out there right now. So I want to just show you a couple of tools really quickly because I want to empower you on your own to sort of like look into this. This is just the Vanguard tool. Go on there. You do not need to have a Vanguard account. You can play with the tool. I'm showing you this. It was easy to goof around with this. I do want to point out that many of the tools now are already factoring in an inflation rate for you. So it can be confusing. So in some of those examples before, I showed that it was like $1 million. The Vanguard tool is going to show you $300,000. It's already factoring in inflation. So just keep in mind, like when you're playing around with tools, it might actually be a little confusing. So just sort of read some of the fine prints. But I want you to know that there's a lot of stuff out there for you to play with. The other tool I wanted to show you is the Social Security. You can actually go on the Social Security website, put in your data, and it'll tell you what they expect your payment to be. So that's pretty nifty. And the last one is which fund. So the first thing I want to say is, people always say the stock market's volatile, you can lose everything. That's true. We all know people that have lost money in the stock market. What actually happened was the stock market tanked and they sold. That's why they lost the money. So this is a picture of the stock market of all time. And my point in showing you this is long-term, the stock market is very resilient. And saving for retirement is a long play. And I'll run through this quickly. So finally, I've exhausted you enough of the charts, which you don't know anything about investing. Super high level, right? Stocks are shares of the digital companies. You can go buy BP or Target right now. Super high risk and high reward. Bonds are debt instruments, very stable, lower risk and reward. The big one for us to look at is the mutual funds, ETFs, and index funds. You don't know the difference between those. Don't freak out. It's not a big deal. They're collections of stocks and bonds. And that's really where you're going to fund your retirement with one of these. And that gives you the risk, high risk and reward of the stock without the volatility of an individual purchase. So my nonpartisan advice to you is just to keep it simple but diversified and pay attention to your expense ratios. Our last topic, expense ratios. Okay, so a couple things about expense ratios. Anytime you invest in a collection of stocks, you're going to pay a fee, right? Someone has to administer those collections of stocks. The expense ratio is the fee charged by the fund for managing that. In a 401k plan, the provider will get a cut, right? Because you have a provider who's administering that plan for you. They're going to take a cut. Your company may pay for it, probably won't pay for it. And so that's why I wanted to tell you that your expense ratio may be higher than the open market. So if you look at the booklet, right, your company will give you a booklet and say this is what you can invest in, and you look at the expense ratio for, let's say, Vanguard 500 index. And then you go to the Vanguard website and you look at the expense ratio for Vanguard 500 index. If they're different, that's fine. And expense ratios can really vary. So this is if you have checked out of this conversation, I'd love you to check back in for 2 minutes. Expense ratios can really vary and they can be very costly. And I want you to know how to read them. So they're going to be represented to you. When you get your booklet of stocks, each individual fund has its own expense ratio. Okay, it's not just one for all. Like the company doesn't negotiate a rate. So I'm going to give you an example between 0.04% and 1%. It used to be for a long time, you may have heard this. Oh, make sure you invest in a mutual fund that's less than 1%. That is old, bad news. Don't listen to that. 1% is very high. They have really gotten the percentages down. So, and I want to show you. Let's say if you only have $1,000 in the account, you never put any more in it, and their expense ratio is 0.04%, then at the end of each year, they will remove 40 cents as a fee. If that's 1%, they're going to remove $10. Doesn't sound like too much big of a deal, right? But when you have $100,000, which you will, every year you're at $40 versus $1,000 a year. So I'm going to show you a real-world example of actual that's happened to me. These are pictures of 2 different booklets from 2 different companies of the same fund. Both of these funds are tracking the 500 index. So if they're not exactly investing in the same companies, they're substantially, basically exactly investing in the same funds. In one of them, I'm paying an expense ratio of 0.04%, and then in the other one, I'm paying 0.88%. So let's look at what that means over 40 years. So here I am, I'm starting with nothing. I let it sit for 40 years. I add my 10% every year. And what I want to show you is how that changes your bottom line. At the end of 40 years, I'm going to pay $7,700 in fee to the first fund and over $150,000 in fees to the second. That's a difference of $144,000 just in fees you're paying, and in this example, to invest in the same funds. So you can imagine when I left that second company, I moved that money out. That's a good reason to look at where your money's invested. Some smaller companies don't have good expense ratio negotiations. So pay attention to your expense ratios. Here's something I've left out, how to cash out or borrow against your retirement funds. I've done that on purpose because it is almost always a very bad, terrible idea, and I beg you to never, ever do it. Figure some other way to fund your lifestyle. This money is there for you. If you borrow against it, you can't add to it, you're not accruing it, right? You lose all the compounding that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. So please have that as a takeaway, to never borrow against or remove money from your funds. It's your protection. And I'll be remiss if I didn't put it like a careful, it's not that complicated, but before you move money around from company to company or company to your own account, when you do conversions, just talk to your employer, your brokerage provider, tax consultants, do your research before moving money around. Cool, that was a lot, and I wanted to give you just a slide of some key takeaways. So to distill all that information down, right, invest as much as you can for as long as you can. Don't obsess about whether it's pre or post-tax money in the beginning. Just know that by the time you retire, you want to amass a mix of taxable and non-taxable money. And then convert where you can. Always at least match your employer. Increase with every pay raise. Pay attention to those expense ratios, factor in inflation. Don't be complacent. And just remember to always take care of number one. Thanks. 44 minutes. I must have talked fast because I did it in 55 minutes yesterday at home. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it. I can answer some questions. Jackie's going to send out a survey later today or tomorrow morning. It's anonymous. It's really helpful to me. I really want these presentations to be useful to groups. And so I'll take your feedback seriously. And it's how I improve upon this presentation. So thank you.
Yeah, and then again, if you are remote and you have questions, if you can just Slack them to me, that would be great. We did have one question come in already. I can start with that.
Sure.
So the first question is, what are the best ways to make your down payment savings work for you instead of just sitting in a savings account?
Sure. It's funny you say that because my second presentation in the seminar series is all about money and how to budget. And so for me, right, I came out of my law and business degree with $230,000 in student loan debt. I did not get a great job out of that. It was like nightmare city for me. And then I got a decent job, and then I started to think about emergency fund, down payment for a condo, paying off student loan, paying my brother back, all these things. And so to answer her question directly, which is more involved in that presentation, is I would say I put my money into like an Ally. Ally's getting over 2% right now, so that's a money. It's not a money market. It's online savings. I think it's a money market. So I would say be cautious about, just don't leave it in your checking accounts. And then the savings account and money market account attached to your bank account is usually paying really crappy percents. It's actually barely more than zero, but there are other companies like Ally, ALLY, there's a bunch like them, and they're offering, I think, 2% right now with no minimums. You can pull the money out anytime. A lot of people like CDs, but you got to put a lot of money in a CD. You're locking the money up. You're saving for a down payment. When I did it, I wanted more flexibility. So that's what I did. And then you can have money moved automatically every month into one of those. And then there's easy apps, free to set up. That's always what I've done. Any other questions? Was this remotely useful? Did you learn anything new? You guys are like, I knew all this. Good. All right, well, thank you. I know in these settings it's hard to ask these kind of questions, but here's my information. I'll put it also in the survey so you can have it if you want to email me with anything. And I really appreciate you guys watching it.
Thank you. Thank you.
How fast was I